Good morning, and thank you for joining us today in our studies of 1 Samuel. Today we are in 1 Samuel chapter 20. And as we come into chapter 20, you have this interaction between Jonathan and David. Remember that at the end of chapter 19, David has fled to Naioth with Samuel in order to get away from King Saul. On 3 different occasions, Saul has either sent messengers or gone himself to try to capture David at Naioth, and the Lord protects him. In chapter 20, David is going to leave Naioth, and he is going to come to Jonathan to try to find out what is going on. He begins by asking what it is that he has done for Saul to want to kill him and for Saul to want him so badly. And yet Jonathan is going to argue that that isn't the case, that he does not believe that his father wants this great evil to come upon him. And so they are going to put together a test. This test is going to be a test to see whether Saul is truly wanting David to be killed and to try to find out the reasoning as to why. And so this elaborate test is going to be that David, being the son-in-law of the king and being one of the members of the king's court, should be at the palace, should be there for eating a meal with the king at the time of the new moon. And that was normally the way that things would function. And yet David is not going to be present on that occasion. And so David and Jonathan kind of hatch this plan that Jonathan will tell Saul that David has asked to return to Bethlehem in order to be able to attend a sacrifice with his family. And if it is the case that Saul is understanding and accepts that particular explanation, then the likelihood is that Saul was not seeking harm for David. Yet if Saul becomes angry, if Saul becomes upset and enraged that David is not present, Jonathan will know that ill will was planned toward David on this occasion. Well, they're going to go through and they are going to unfold this plan, and Saul is going to become extremely angry with Jonathan. And it's going to be anger directed at Jonathan personally, because of the things that are going to take place. He is going to go so far as to even hurl a spear at Jonathan in an attempt to kill him. Remember that Jonathan is one of his most trusted family members. He is the head of his army. He is the one who has been with Saul from the very beginning and has been working side by side with Saul from the very beginning. Saul has other sons, but Jonathan is going to be the one who holds the highest rank and privilege among the sons. And so to have this reaction from Saul is going to be one that is going to be very strong, and it's also going to be very forceful to Jonathan as to what it is that is going on. But the second thing I want us to notice here in chapter 20 is the reasoning that Saul gives to Jonathan as to why it is that he wants David dead. In verse 31, he says, "For as long as the son of Jesse lives on the earth, you shall not be established, nor your kingdom. Now therefore send and bring him to me, for he shall surely die." It's not because of any explicit thing that David has done. It is because of the fact that David has been anointed as the next king of Israel. And it is because God has promised Saul that his line shall not succeed on the throne. And so because of that, Saul is seeking to kill David as a last-ditch effort to preserve his lineage on the throne of Israel. And so Saul tells Jonathan that the reason that these things are taking place, the reason that Saul is going so strongly after David, is because it is the only way that Jonathan is going to reach the throne. Now, ultimately, this isn't going to work either. And Saul should know that going against God and that trying to take out the one that God planned to put on the throne so that God would just somehow miraculously let Jonathan take the throne isn't going to work and isn't a good plan. And yet it is the plan that Saul has concocted, and it is the reason why all of this is going on. Saul has been one who has been disobedient to God on a number of occasions, and it's because of that disobedience that he is going to lose his throne. And yet Saul has it in his mind that continued disobedience and rebellion against God is somehow going to get him what he wants, when that is exactly the means that has taken away what he wanted. So many times people will continue a bad course of action to try to get rid of the consequences from previous bad courses of action. And that is exactly what Saul is doing here. But then in the third place, in chapter 20, I want us to consider the promise. And that is the promises that were made between between Jonathan and David. And in Jonathan and David's instance, you have in verse 42, the very final verse of chapter 20, this promise to go in peace from Jonathan to David, since we have both sworn in the name of the Lord, saying, may the Lord be between you and me, and between my descendants and your descendants forever. So he arose and departed, and Jonathan went into the city. They make this pact between them as friends, as being ones that are like brothers, that they are going to take care of not just each other, but they are going to take care of each other's families, their descendants, as time goes on. David is going to keep this promise. Jonathan is not going to have the opportunity to, though Jonathan will be faithful to his promise to watch out for David. David is going to have the opportunity to take care of the descendants of Jonathan, and he is going to hold up his end of the bargain. This promise of friendship, this promise of love and care and concern for each other, is not one that is going to be given lightly by either of these two men, and it is one that is going to be fulfilled. We need to be careful about promises that we make. We need to be careful about the kinds of promises that we make, but when we make promises, it needs to be with the full intention of seeing them through to the end. Jonathan and David do that here, and we'll see the nature of it in the years to come. These are some of the things that are found in 1 Samuel chapter 20. There's a lot of things that we could talk about in reference to friendship, in reference to family issues and lashing out at one another and various other things. But these are the basic tenets of chapter 20, and I hope that they're beneficial to you. Next time, we will come back and we will begin examining 1 Samuel chapter 21. But until then, have a great day.